Hello and welcome to the Exam Study Experts podcast. Today I'm joined by my friend Scott Hardiman, confidence coach who specialises in helping people rebuild their confidence and get their drive back. Today is something of a hybrid episode, digging into Scott's own student story, which is a very inspirational message and I think will be very relatable for many people listening, struggling perhaps with difficult life context outside of their studies and or having challenges with doubting yourself or getting anxious around the study process. Scott then breaks down a fantastic set of very practical tools that we can all use to help us boost our confidence and in our studies generally. Lots of really practical takeaways that you can use following this episode to help you make progress. I think there'll be lots you really enjoy in today's episode. Without further ado, here's Scott Hardiman. Enjoy. Scott, a very warm welcome to the Exam Study Expert podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Really looking forward to it. Just before we dive in, I wondered if we could maybe just set the scene. So I know you kind of work on confidence and we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. Just to introduce the conversation today, what is confidence? What does it mean to you? Why is it such an important thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important from my perspective anyway, naturally. But what is confidence? It's such a great question. Wow, that's pretty powerful. I think it's been able to follow through on the things that you say you're going to do. Many a times in my life, I've been wanting to do things, but I haven't pursued them. And that ultimately comes down to not feeling confident enough. So I think confidence is saying, hey, I'd like to explore that, whatever it is. It could be work related, relationship related, anything personal. And saying, yeah, okay, I'm going to follow this through. I'm going to do it. Take responsibility for it. So that's what I would say is confidence from my perspective.
Fantastic. Well, look, I know you've got a bit of a kind of a personal story about how you came to this world and this focus. So, yeah, I wonder if you might just share a little bit of the backstory, your journey that kind of brought you to this subject now.
Yeah, I mean, as with most things, I think in life. Well, not always, but from the people that I speak to, a lot of the reason that they are doing something is often because of a challenge or a pain. And that ultimately is something that prompted me to step into this world of personal development and confidence and mindset and this never ending world of growth, I think. So a little bit of my story. I tend to start in the place of work, which was, I was a funeral director for around 10 years, and it wasn't something that I'd planned to do. I was actually an estate agent at the time, and I was terrible at it because I had zero confidence. I don't know why I went for the job, but it was something that I just wanted something to dive into. I think probably unconsciously I was trying to challenge myself so I could grow, but I wasn't very good at managing my emotions and myself at that point. So I was an estate agent, and I was, like I said, not very good at it at all. I'd go red, I'd sweat. If anyone asked me a question, it was, I wanted to run away. And then a friend of mine, his brother was in the funeral industry. So he said, hey, look, you're not happy where you are. There's a job going. I think you'd be good at it. I was like, okay, wow. And I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not, but I thought, okay, yeah, I'm not happy where I am. Let's just go with it. And I went into the funeral world and I was actually very good at it. I could really understand people. I think it was, I learned a lot from them, and I learned a lot about myself. And that's where I started to gradually build confidence, because you kind of have to. You can't be in that space and be walking in front of a hearse, as an example, or dealing with people at a very, very challenging time of their lives and not show some level of confidence. However, it was a battle consistently. But I start there because I think it gave me a lot of skills about how to deal with people, and that weirdly it transfers into what I'm doing now. And then I battled with anxiety for a long period of time. It was crippling anxiety. It was a very physical symptom for me. So I felt like I needed to, it came out of the blue. I was not expecting it at all. I think that happens for most people. But I felt like I needed to take a deep breath in. And when I couldn't get that deep breath, then I'd just spiral into anxiety attacks and panic attacks. And that was consistent. And as you can imagine, we're breathing all the time. So when I got that deep breath, if I could, I'd get a bit of respite. And then sometimes 20 minutes later, sometimes 30 seconds later, it would happen again. And it was just a consistent battle and a real challenge for me. That's what I viewed it at the time. And that was really what prompted me to dive into personal development, because I wanted to find a way out of this pain I was in, really.
Amazing, amazing, and we'll bring the story back up to date in a moment. I wondered for the benefit of those listening, when we chatted a couple of weeks ago, and you told me a little. I think clearly not a probably fair to say not an especially privileged background when you were growing up, and I wonder if you'd be willing maybe just to share a little bit of color on that, for particularly for the benefit of perhaps inspiring other people that may be following in your shoes, also struggling with challenges as they grow up, and difficult circumstances, and maybe just giving us that sort of role model for sort of what's ultimately possible, and how you might sort of change your stars in future. But yeah, I think fair to say you didn't have an easy start in life.
No, it was a challenge for sure. I think growing up, it's a strange one. I come from a family of well, a lot of women around me, and obviously I've got my dad, and we're getting closer as I get older, which is interesting. But I've had women around me all the time, so there's a lot of love and I would say support and encouragement. When we go back a few years, a lot of years now, I'm 30, nearly 38. So yeah, my mum and dad separated at a young age, and we actually moved away from where I was born, which was in Bournemouth, Poole, in the UK. And we moved into an area that wasn't very nice, and it was a really big struggle for me. It's where I didn't know anyone. I was only the age of 12, 13, and that's the age, I think, especially for a young lad, is to try and find your tribe, youngsters around you that you can connect with and vibe from. And for me, I just didn't have that. And then I was in different schools, and I got bullied quite heavily. My education, I was a bright guy. I still think I'm a bright guy now. I wouldn't say I'm hyper intelligent, but I can hold my own, and I can learn things. I can retain information, and yeah, I would say that I'm smart. But I wasn't able to express that because of the disjointed approach to my life, I think, at that stage. So yeah, I moved from school to school, got bullied multiple times. We did end up, moving to a nice area because my mum met my stepdad, and we moved to a really nice area in Cambridgeshire, which was kind of like I always funny enough, my mum and that gentleman there are not together anymore, but I always think fondly of him because he took us out of the really challenging space that we were in, and without him, I don't think I'd be kind of where I am today, achieving the things that I have to this point. And then the same kind of thing happened there. I did find a little bit of a tribe and a group of friends, but again, I wasn't able to really find a foothold in my education. I would say, a C, B student, which for me was a big surprise because I wasn't given that kind of background. And I think that shows if I had more stability, perhaps I would be able to do the things that I wanted to at that stage, which was I wanted to go to university. I really wanted to strive for more, but I was distracted. I wasn't able to really focus. But I managed to, grind through, which was great. I went to sixth form. I dropped out of that. I then went to college to try and do sports psychology because I was a really keen sportsman. And again, I just wasn't able to really get a foothold in it. And I ended up dropping out of that as well. So background, I mean, what the lesson is there is that, even if you have those ups and downs, it doesn't mean that you can't still achieve things. And I think that was a big lesson for me, and it helped me to get to where I am.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing, and I'm sure there's people listening that relate. I'm curious. You have done a lot of work as an adult, and dived into the world of personal development, and now teach to others. I'm just curious, with hindsight, with the tools and the outlook that you now have. You described kind of dropping out of sixth form, not making it in college. It sounds like you have the kind of raw tools, the intellectual tools and the potential, but it didn't quite click. With the tools and the outlook you have now, if you'd had some of that back then, do you feel the outcome might have been different in some of those academic experiences?
For sure. Wonderful question. Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's one of I think if we're out there and you're listening and you're young, is really try and give yourself as many tools as possible when it comes to mindset. Because I fundamentally believe that if I had the tools that I have now, things would be different. Well, when I say things would have been different, it's not that I want them to be different. I think it's just the knowing now that if I had them, then the path would have been different to where I am now. It's not like I'm not happy. I'm extremely happy, but it always intrigues me. We can't do anything about the past. There's that quote, what happened happened and couldn't have happened any other way, because it didn't. If it was meant to have been different, it would have been. So you have to kind of live by that, I think. But yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, if I'd had strategies and tools to cope with my anxiety, with the lack of confidence, I would have gone to college. I would have completed that qualification. I probably would have gone to university, and I'd be in a different seat right now. But
there you go. Yeah. Interesting. So for anyone looking to, maybe they're relatively at the start of their journey in terms of the world of personal development and the potential of kind of working on yourself, your outlook, your mindset, etc. Are there any particular, books, tools, resources, courses that you especially recommend for beginners, particularly maybe younger people at sort of sixth form, university, that are just sort of in the early days of starting to discover this world? Is there anything in particular you'd suggest people take a look at?
Yeah, there's so many books. Listening to podcasts like this, I think, is going to have a big impact. But I mean, there's so many tools that I can share and action items that we can discuss. But I think a book that I love is called The Brain. It's around here somewhere. I think it's by a gentleman called David Eagleman. It's a really fantastic read, and it gives you a great insight into the brain. And it's not heavy, it's simplified, but it has you sit back and you go, wow. The brain is extraordinary, and I think having some understanding of what we have between in our skull is incredible. Because I know for years I didn't really understand my brain at all. I was more about physical, my muscles and the way that I looked, because that was another way of me trying to feel good enough. But yeah, having an understanding just how powerful the brain is imperative, I think. And then another book that really opened my eyes to personal development, I've got it here, is actually Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within. I know it's a typical kind of like life coaching, coaching space. Oh, Tony Robbins. But honestly, that book, when I was crippled with anxiety, it was one of the first books. It was actually probably the second book I read. The first one was The Chimp Paradox, which was a great read. And then it was Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. And I didn't actually even finish that book, weirdly. It was enough for me to just open my eye, implement a few strategies and go, wow, I'm going to run with this. But it had a profound impact on me.
Yeah. Great recommendations. Thank you. I'd love to ask you a bit about anything practical we can take from this in a moment. But just to kind of pick up on the brain and David Eagleman, you said, for you it was quite insightful and quite helpful, kind of learning a little bit about what's going on up there. So, obviously a huge, giant subject. But are there any, one or two kind of lessons that you feel might be particularly interesting or helpful to sort of share with us today in terms of things we maybe don't realize about how the brain works that might be helpful for us to understand?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that sticks with me the most from that book, and I suppose it's not necessarily a strategy as such, but it's just I like to work a lot around insight, not just information. I think information is fantastic and it's really important, but insight can shift our world very, very quickly. So it's those aha moments, like, oh wow, and then it has us look at things in a different perspective. And and it's been a while since I've read the book, but one thing that really stuck with me was that, and I to be honest, I didn't fact check this, but I like to think that he didn't share information that wasn't factual. Is that the external world from us is there is no color, and our eyes and our brain receive the information through vibrations and then interpret that and turn it into the color. And that for me, I was like, wow, how have I not known that? Look how powerful the brain is. What can I do to utilize that to get more of what I want from life and achieve more of what I want? Because if it does that just from wavelengths, then it can do a whole lot more. And that was the one of the biggest insights for me. And also that often from this book anyway, the brain doesn't care how it gets information. It will just interpret what it gets, whether it's through vibrations, whether it's through hearing, sight, senses. So again, it was another insight for me of like, oh wow, yeah, I didn't really understand the true power of what I've got.
Yeah, amazing. I wish we had our in-house writing coach specialist, Dr. Alex Hibbell, with us on this interview, because she did her PhD on visual perception. And she's a real kind of, that's her real sort of area of academic specialism. So it'd be fascinating to kind of dive into that a bit more deeply. But yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing what the brain, I mean, from my understanding of that field, yeah, it is pretty amazing what the brain can do in terms of perceiving the world around us and kind of what's going on between our ears with all that stuff. So amazing. Great. So Look, I mean, if you're willing, Scott, I mean, is there anything I mean, obviously a huge, huge subject and, many things we can learn and, I don't want to sort of pretend we can kind of distill down a huge, great thing into just, 10, 15 minutes. But are there any kind of little tools you think we can perhaps learn from you today to help us get started?
Yeah, I mean, there's a fair few. I wrote down kind of my top tips in preparation for this. But I think one is and it took me a while to actually realize the connection. But confidence ultimately comes from action. Now we can look at a deeper level of why we're not moving forward in the way that we want, or maybe we're not confident in ourselves and so on. And that can sometimes be a bit of a deeper level. So, for example, for me, the reason for my anxiety and lack of confidence was because I was coming from a place of not feeling good enough and not feeling safe. So I had to do the deeper work. But it's also just recognizing, potentially not as deep, but confidence comes from action, because what action does is it allows us to learn. When we do something like, for example, this podcast, I've done podcasts in the past, and before I used to be, even though I was building my confidence and I was confident in myself, I was very nervous, because it wasn't something that I had done before. Whereas now I've done it because I've taken action, I've learned, I've developed a lot of skills around this, and I've grown in that area. And then I took more action and I started to learn and grow even more. And then what happens when we do that is that we become more competent. And then when we're competent, that's when confidence comes into play. It's like driving a car. When we're driving a car, we first get in it and we're not confident at all. And the reason for that is because we're not competent. The confidence comes because we continue to go back, we have the lessons, we make mistakes, and we learn and we grow, and then confidence comes. So I like to think of it as if there was a tool, kind of micro experiments, I like to call it, or the confidence gym. And it's like training a muscle. I don't go into the gym and lift 100 kilograms straight away, right? I start small, and it's these micro experiments or tests that I kind of implement. And it could be speaking in a meeting or recording a video for social media. It doesn't matter, whatever is applies to you. And just recognizing that every time I do that, those micro steps, I'm building that confidence gradually. And I recognize that, oh, okay, I didn't die. I'm still alive. And I've got something there. And then it allows me to kind of keep moving forward. And if you've done any research on the impact of compounding, you'll know the benefit of that. So one step, and then you compound the next one, and then all of a sudden your confidence is sky high. So that's one step.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. I mean, I think a challenge that some people might have coming back to academia or coming to academia, I'll talk to, for example, people who, perhaps followed a similar path to your own and had similar challenges and are coming back to academia later in life, wanting to get their A-levels, to get their degrees, to go back and get a master's, whatever it is. And sometimes that confidence is a real challenge, particularly if it's been knocked earlier in life and rebuilding that. So I guess the takeaway there would be think about, the big undergraduate process and exam at the end of it, or the big 1-year master's with the exam at the end of it. That's quite a big goal, I suppose. Listening to you talking, Scott, I'm thinking like, is there a little mini thing you could kind of get under your belt just to kind of get some quick wins and start to feel a bit of confidence again? Maybe it's a small like 6-week certification in maybe even not the same field as you're studying your master's in, but just to go through that mechanics of studying for an exam, taking it and getting that certification in your hand, and that just gives you a little bit of a boost and you go, right, okay, I can move on to the next thing and scale up from there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's so powerful. It's recognizing that, okay, well, that I did that. It builds trust. It builds that confidence. And then all of a sudden, the next step comes, okay, well, I can do that. So I remember a conversation with my daughter once before. She's nearly 8, but she was about 5, I think, and she was a bit nervous about going to the dentist. And I said, oh, okay, well, I imagine you're thinking about being in the chair at the dentist. And she was only 5 at the time. But I tried to keep it as simple as possible. And she was like, yeah, I am. And I thought, okay, well, what's the one thing that we can do now? And she went, oh, get dressed. I was like, okay, let's just do that. And then she got dressed. I said, what's next? She said, brush my teeth. I was like, great, let's do that. And the next was downstairs and it was shoes on. And then all of a sudden, half an hour later, she sat in the dentist chair, not overwhelmed, because she followed the process of the small micro steps to lead you to that bigger goal. And if we have the bigger goal, like you said, it can be very overwhelming. So just small chunk it, make it as small as you can, tiny. And then you'll find yourself, oh, wow, I'm here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love that one. I mean, so many of us procrastinate on particularly things like very big unstructured tasks as well. So, that same strategy, it might not be something you're kind of, I guess, scared of or kind of anxious about in the same way as the dentist. It might be something you're just putting off because it's big and hairy and, not very well structured. So like a big piece of writing, I've been known on a bad day to just turn on the laptop, open Word as like item number 1 on my to-do list. And then that just gets the ball rolling. And once you've got Word out there, you've got to just write a sentence, write that first sentence. And then you start to build some momentum and you get into it. But yeah, what's one thing you can do now? And then what's the next thing and the next thing? And you can gradually get rolling from there. Amazing. So action builds competence, builds confidence. And how can you look for that first thing that you can make a start on? Great. Thank you. What else were you thinking?
Wow. I mean, one thing that I really like to talk about and it's a story that I've heard, and again, your listeners may have heard it before, maybe you have, but the confidence that if we want to build confidence, we need to step outside of our comfort zone. I mean, if anyone listens to me or they read anything else or find me elsewhere, you'll know that I like to keep things really simple because I think the simple are often the best way. There are lots of intricate and very detailed processes and structures out there which work. They have a place, but I tend to find that we all naturally drift back to the simple strategies because they work. So if you think about the comfort zone, it's stretch. I call it the stretch zone. So you've got your comfort zone, and then slightly outside that is your stretch zone. And then you've got really uncomfortable outside of that. So I would say day by day really is trying to step into that stretch zone as often as you can within the day. And it doesn't have to be these huge things like you mentioned a moment ago. It's those tiny steps that take you out of your comfort zone into that stretch zone. And it's recognizing that often when we do that, not always, but there are a lot of people out there that will be like, "Oh, why are you doing that? It's not going to work." And I tend to find that stops people in their steps. It could be someone wanting to go to university, but their family haven't been to university before. Oh, well, is that worth it? Are you sure you can do it? No one in the family's done it before. And therefore, they're trying to keep that person in that comfort zone. Often they don't even realize they're doing it. So it's just understanding, okay, well, if I just stretch myself slightly, I won't be deeply uncomfortable, but I'll be somewhat uncomfortable. And then that in itself builds confidence because, again, you start to prove to yourself that, oh, I can do that. And then you stretch the stretch zone and then the comfort zone you can step into. But I heard a story and it was, and I'm not sure whether it's PG around here. I'm going to try and change the language. But imagine that you are in a swimming pool and everyone's in that swimming pool. Everyone that you know, most people, let's say, are in their swimming pool. And you're bobbing around and you're good. You're comfortable. It's warm. The sun is shining. It's quite cozy in there. But you start to look outside the swimming pool and you go, oh, what's out there? It's just all of a sudden you start to see what's outside the swimming pool. And you think, well, I'm going to explore there. And then people behind you go, don't do that. No. I've seen people go out before. It's not good. That doesn't work out for you. And you go, oh, okay. And you stay in that comfort zone. You stay in the swimming pool. And then all of a sudden you go, no, I'm going to step out of that pool. And everyone's shouting, don't do it. Get back in. You're climbing the ladder, trying to get out. They go, jump back in. It's not going to be the same for you. And you step out of the pool. And it's cold. And it's windy. And the rain starts. And it feels really, really uncomfortable. And you can hear people behind you saying, just come back, just jump back in. It's not worth it. You've changed all of this stuff. And you turn around and you look at the swimming pool and you realize that they're all swimming in pee. Would you get back in that swimming pool?
No, of course not.
Yeah. So it's recognizing that often the comfort zone is a people, a piss pool, whatever you want to call it. And it's understanding if you step out of that, yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, you're going to be not feeling so good straight away. But the more that you do that, the more confidence you'll build it within yourself. And other people might not like it straight away, but they will come around to that. And I really like that story.
It certainly has sort of a bite to it, doesn't it? It's quite visceral. That's great. And I'm reminded of, often I'll talk to young people and they'll be talking about how their friends sort of expect them to be, engaging on whatever kind of messaging out, you're on Snapchat or WhatsApp or whatever, WeChat, and they kind of expect you to be on there all evening, back and forth, or maybe you and your friends are into gaming and they expect you to kind of be, logged into Xbox Live and there for a game, whatever. And kind of this sort of weight of expectation can sometimes get in the way of you actually just turning all that off and getting focused and getting your work done. So there's a sort of a slight element to which these other people are sort of calling you back and you're trying to get on with your work and make some progress. And they're sort of calling you back into the pool and being like, oh, no, what are you doing? So yeah, I completely agree. There are times you just need to kind of turn down some of those voices, and either they'll come along with you. But in some cases, maybe they won't. And then you find yourself with a different set, moving slightly into a different set of friends and friendships as a result. But yeah, it's difficult things to navigate for young people, particularly, that social element, that social dimension. So it's a really nice metaphor to bear in mind. Thank you. Okay. So in at number 3.
Number 3 is a big thing for me is physiology. So I like to change the way that I am standing to build confidence. This is more of an action to result. If you do this, it really does have a profound impact pretty much straight away. So yeah, it's about how you noticed how if anyone's watching, do people watch this?
Yeah, someone watching on YouTube. Hello.
Yeah, also, but I've listened to you, so I haven't watched. But yeah, it's I'm not sitting I'm not slouched over. I'm not kind of crossed my arms. I'm sitting back. My head's up. My shoulders are back, and my chest is up because I know that helps me build confidence. And I remember when I was extremely low in confidence, I came across this like changing your physiology and hands on hips. I thought, oh yeah, whatever. This is the early days, and I thought, oh, you know what? I will do anything and everything to help me right now because I feel absolutely terrible. So I used to stand and I'd consciously put my hands on my hips and stand in this kind of Superman pose with my shoulders back. And I wouldn't make it too obvious, but it was enough. And then I'd also do it at home. And I thought, okay, maybe it will work. Maybe it'll have an impact. And whether or not it did, all I know now is that if I'm in a situation that feels slightly uncomfortable and it's challenging my confidence, I will just catch myself in that position. It's like I've trained my body to say, oh, stand like this to help you in this moment. So for me, it's about changing our physiology, and it can be something quick. It could be just a short routine, just something specific to you that can have you feeling more confident in that moment. My go-to is shoulders back, head up, chest up, and hands on hips. I find that really boosts my confidence. So changing our physiology is really important. It's not just, confidence isn't just in the head. It is in the body. So yeah, before you walk into the room, just check in and see how that goes. That's kind of a really big one for me.
Yeah, that's a nice one, and something we could all apply in those, particularly those kind of moments. It feels a little bit pressurized, heading into maybe it's a lesson we're not that confident in. Maybe it's heading into the exam or the Viva or whatever you've got to face. Yeah, just taking a moment, checking in with yourself, doing those. Yeah, those you doing your move, putting your body in a place that gives you confidence. Yeah, and this is very well studied psychology. Like, researchers have consistently found that when you adopt these kind of power poses, as I think one paper put it, you can measure the impact in like hormones like testosterone as a result of just adopting a slightly different stance. So, it's quite powerful stuff and pretty well studied as a sort of robust science. It's not sort of just like woo-woo stuff. It's very real. It's very real. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, great. So in number 3, we've got the power of physiology. What's our 4th?
So the 4th one is understanding that confidence is evidence-based. So it's built through providing evidence that you can do something, and it could be a win, it could be something that didn't go the way that you want, but that's feedback, surviving those hard moments. So you don't necessarily need to feel confident to begin, from my perspective anyway. Actually, if I'm honest, most of the time it's 100% not the case, especially if you're stepping into something new. You're not going to be confident in that specific skill or activity. So it's about building that evidence. So I've got something that I call the confidence bank. And that is essentially, I keep a bank of the things that I have shown confidence in. And then I tend to turn to those before going into a situation which requires me to be more confident. It's like a list that I can turn to say, oh yeah, remember when you were confident here and here and here and here? And what that does is it just changes my state. It changes my emotional state, my energy. And then I show up because I've reminded myself just how amazing I am. As cheesy as that sounds, but I'm a really big believer in that. And I used to look at myself and tell myself I'm awesome. Oh, like I said, I did anything and everything to boost me up. And that's not ego. That's just, understanding my worth and my value, and then having that in some sort of confidence bank where I can look to, I've got it on a Google Drive, and I look at it and I say, okay, if it's at times where I feel like I need that extra confidence, I'll read it through, I'll look at the evidence, and I'll I'll go into that situation. And again, it's a gradual process. You won't instantly feel 100% when you read this evidence bank, but the more that you do it, the more you'll recognize, actually, yeah, I am awesome. I can do these things. Look what I've done. And it definitely helps.
Save the evidence when you're confident and then look back on it to inspire confidence the next time. That's great. That's great. I guess perhaps slightly relatedly, in at number 5.
Yeah, is keeping your promises. It's making sure that when you say you're going to do something, you do it. And it's so easy these days, I think, to not follow through on the things that we say we're going to do, because it doesn't often, in the olden days, I suppose we could say, you'd have to, speak to someone in person, or you'd have to jump on a phone, whereas now you can just ignore because of technology. I would say that in itself, by saying you're going to do something, and obviously there are times when something will come up. Maybe I've got a daughter, she might be poorly, I might need to shift things around. Like that's a given. But every time that we say we're going to do something and then we don't do it, often because of a lack of confidence, we're chipping away at ourselves. We're chipping away at that trust that we have for ourselves. So if we can do everything we can to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to follow through with it, because what that is, it's taking responsibility, it's committing. And that is so powerful. It's something that happens deep within us, and we can follow through with what we are saying we're going to do.
Absolutely. And some of your previous points can kind of help get that cycle. If we're stuck in a bit of a rut where we've got a bad habit of not keeping promises, things you talked about earlier, like those kind of, micro experiments and those just getting those small little wins and then starting to rebuild that confidence, that almost trust in yourself that you can keep your own promises, and then sort of building up from there, I guess.
Yeah, and there are ways that you can make sure that it is, because I know sometimes the personal development and mindset strategies can feel quite not so tangible. It's like, oh well, how do I do that? Well, it's quite easy. You start with one tiny promise every single day. It can be tiny to start with. You do it and then you track. And then again, there's that evidence that you're logging that you are doing the things you say you're going to do. And you can say, if someone ever says, well, do you do what you say you're going to do? Absolutely. I've got a list. Here you go. So yes, sometimes it can feel this kind of strategy, this mindset is like, okay, well, how do I know I've worked on it? Well, it's very simple. Start with a tiny promise. You do the thing, you log it so you can look back on it.
Yeah. And the secret sometimes make it so small that you can't help but do it, even if it feels almost ridiculous. We've talked about it on the podcast before. The Virginia Valian's essay on learning to work, I think it's called, and she describes herself as having quite a serious work problem, I think is the language she used. In other words, she was trying to study for an academic qualification, a PhD, and she was just not able to make any progress at all, and she's staring at a blank page day after day. And so she started with just 5 minutes a day. And it sounds almost ridiculous to kind of many people in academia are working on things like, well, just 5 minutes a day. Well, it's nothing. But actually, if you do that day after day after day, it's sort of, you actually can make some tangible progress. There's 5 minutes a day. You can read a page, you can draft a paragraph, and then you start to commit to those, you start to build that momentum back again and build it up to 15 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, in quotes, normal looking day of work. But that's a really interesting read for anyone that's, looking for quite an extreme example of how that might play out in reality, in terms of kind of building academic habits back. So in at number 6, Scott, you wanted to tell us a little bit about awareness, just to round off the list. So
Yeah.
it's power of self-awareness.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that transformed my life is starting to understand, when I say awareness, it's being aware of the language that I was using in a self-talk, because often we're trying to make change, but we don't know what we're saying to ourselves. And there's something that for me is the number one strategy we need to work on, and that is like a muscle. We need to build on that. But there's a statement I use, and it's limiting language leads to a limited life. So most of the time, if we're not getting the results we want, if we were to track back, we'd hear ourselves say thoughts to ourselves that are very, very limiting. So from my perspective, I'm not perfect. I need to keep my awareness high, because as I'm taking myself out of my comfort zone consistently, I'm going to experience these thoughts of, oh, can you do this? Is it going to work out? I'm not going to be able to do this. Remember what happened in the past? All of these things all these thoughts that come up. And my only way to be able to manage that is by working on my awareness. And then I can start to take responsibility for that and then do something about it by challenging those thoughts. Because if I'm honest, 90 to 95% of those thoughts that I have are just not true. So why am I choosing to believe something or to feed the thought that is not true and is not helpful? So if I can recognize what they are, I can then approach it in a slightly different way and very simply not choose suffering. Because if I'm telling myself that I'm not good enough, if I'm telling myself that I can't do X, Y, and Z, then I am actively choosing to suffer. So I'm very much about raise your awareness, do something about it, and you'll see that you can transform your life very, very quickly, actually.
Phenomenal. Well, look, what a great set of ideas to share with us. Thank you. Thank you so much. For anyone listening, sometimes the kind of work, particularly some of the things you're describing towards the end there, Scott, sometimes just a little bit of an outside perspective and working with someone can be quite a valuable step to take in the process. So perhaps just to finish with, would you share a little of the work you do and where people can find you if they might be interested in learning more?
Yeah, there's so much information out there. You've got wonderful podcasts like this. You have ChatGPT and AI these days. You have, I'm writing on Substack at the moment. You've got articles you can read. There's so much information out there. The reason that I see people not making the change or not growing in their confidence or achieving their potential is, as cheesy as that sounds, is because they are not implementing the things that are out there. Knowledge is potential power. It's only powerful when we use it. For me, I'm very much about, I can give you information, but it might help it to an extent, but it's about how can we make sure that you're using that information to move forward. So that's how I like to work with the guys that I do. And it's around confidence, it's around mindset, it's around finding clarity. And if anyone wants any help with that, then there I am.
Fantastic. Well, Scott, thank you so much once again for coming on the show. It's been a real blast chatting and so many great practical thoughts for us to take away as well to help us in building our confidence. Scott, thank you so much once again.
Thank you.